where things are not settled down, then you have to go and tweak them for yourself. Like you don't have to be waiting for anyone. You can make it work.
That's right.
Mm. All right.
Very cool. Hey, as always, that was really satisfying. Thanks.
Yeah.
Good. Well, now I can't wait to play with all the next things. This is great. And like I said, I'm going to test this on mainnet ASAP just to feel good about that kind of end-to-end solution. And then I'll test the other version of the contract with the PKH and just hopefully see that everything's working.
All right. All right. And stay tuned for the other things.
Yeah. Yeah. Rock and roll. Well, hang out, man, if you want to, but obviously I know you got a lot going on. Thanks for this time.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. And I'm glad that we managed to get this working.
Yeah. And hey, everybody, I got a fun update for you. We just had a nice breakthrough. So fun thing to launch with. How's it going? Open up chat here. Hey, Lucas, Curtis, Juan.
Only good news.
Only good news.
Yeah,
All the
I'm
best.
so thrilled today. I have a toy to play.
Ooh,
What are
you playing with? Nice, congratulations.
Yeah, I have environment already.
Hey.
Sebastian helped me tremendously with that, step by step, and he told me, listen, don't try to understand, just do it. Okay.
Hey, that's good advice, you know, just well, and that's like what's on my screen now. This is one of those things, right? How many times have I queried protocol parameters without looking at them? And that's basically, you know, every time you run Cardano CLI query protocol params for a given network, you got a file with all this information in it. And ideally, when the system is working, you could just kind of ignore those values. And similarly, if you're using a front-end template, you would query those values from an endpoint. And so Koios has long been a source of those protocol parameters and protecting for the fact that maybe those will change. We have the ability to not hard code those into a project and grab those every time we build a transaction, just to be sure. But that service is not up yet. For example, on Koios, Block4Us provides it, but I'm personally just trying to avoid that. And so what we had to do is kind of go into those protocol params and compare them to what was provided in Mesh. We did find that a few were different and that was causing an error. So I've shared a couple of times over the last week or two that I'm just trying to get a few basic faucet transactions working in the front end template before sending everybody else out on assignments to do with this stuff. We finally had that breakthrough of recognizing, oh, wait a minute, some of these params were different in the pre-production environment. So we changed those and that eliminated an error. And then also, I think as people were showing up, Abdelkrim was explaining to me how the different Plutus cost models work from Vassal and Alonzo. And we have, you know, what Mesh does is it abstracts a lot of this for us. And so there's a really helpful tag we can add when we initiate a transaction. So, right, I got a new transaction here. This blue parenthesis ends right here. So everything in between. This initiator wallet is kind of what I automatically want to do, but then I can hard code some parameters and then specify the network error. And when we added this stuff correctly right here, the errors I was getting trying to unlock from the faucet on pre-production were solved. So that feels really exciting. And now we can move to some next steps. I'm happy to go a little deeper into that transaction now that it's working as well. But just wanted to say hi first. Janti, Surajit, Yuli, Justin's here, Sebastian. Hey, everybody. I'm going to stop sharing for just a few minutes. If I can find my Zoom, here we go. Okay. So welcome. It's week 7 of the work we're doing together here, and we're really jumping into the real project-based part of the course, where different people here will be working on different things. You might choose to specialize in really focusing on Plutus code, or really focusing on front-end interactions. Or you might choose to complete some of the mastery assignments on everything. More on that in a moment. And then at the 400 level, we have contributions. So, you know, we provided a list for you at the very start of this course of the projects that we'll be working on together. And hopefully you've started to see how those projects are starting to ramp up. So for today's agenda, I was hoping to start with Q&A from everybody here, and also to review the Miro board. And then we'll see what, based on what questions people had, what we should be focused on. Before I share screen again on the PPBL Miro board, does anybody have any immediate questions or topics you hope that we might cover today? Okay. So right here, I'm going to share this link, and you can also find it in Discord. This is a public board that anybody is welcome to jump in and use. And I promise this is the last organizational tool we'll share. I know that we kind of pushed people by having you learn how to use Canvas, and some people were brand new to Discord. The last brand new tool we're using is Miro. And since very early on at Gimbal Labs, we've been using Miro as kind of a very flexible place to do a little project management and organization. So previously, last week, we looked at some of, I guess this was 2 weeks ago now, just a high-level view of where people are, what you're interested in doing, and where you want to go. I'm not going to review all of this right now, but there are a couple of action items that I recommend working through if you haven't done this yet. There's also an action item down here to add a profile about yourself. And the only reason to fill out these profiles is to send your signal to other people here about what you're interested in, what you want to work on, and all of that. Oh, hold on one second. Sorry. So again, this is the purpose of these cards is so you can show other people who are participating in this course what you're interested in. You can browse the same for other folks, and you can find out if there's some interesting collaborations available to you. What we're focused on for the rest of this course is a set of projects, and these statuses will be continually updated over the next few weeks. At a high level, we have 3 projects going, and then another mini project that we can use to kind of test our skills, both with Plutus and building transactions on Cardano CLI, and with the front end, which we just had a breakthrough on today, and I'm happy to jump back into that in a few minutes. But to provide an update first on these big picture projects, the Gimbal Bounty Treasury and Escrow contracts are now published in the main repo for this course. I'll drop that link in the chat just to remind you. I think a lot of people already have it, but it's the PPBL course 2 repo. So that's right here in the chat. And at this link on GitLab, there's a new folder called Project 303. I'll put a direct link to that as well. That has 2 Plutus projects that we're going to work on together over the next couple weeks. One of them is a game that, if you've studied Plutus Pioneers, might look familiar. And what Mix did is he refactored that game to not require some Plutus application backend interactions, but instead to more align with the approach we're taking in this course of really understanding how transactions work by trying to build those transactions ourselves. And then if we're interested, try to make those transactions work in the front-end template. He's going to give us an introduction to the 0-1 game starting tomorrow, and we'll also offer to do a deeper dive if anybody's interested in doing some extended study on all of that. Whether you can make it to those extended lectures or not, he'll be recording those, and everybody will be able to reference those. Now, I just mentioned the Project 303 folder in the course repo. The other thing you'll see in that folder is a template version of this Gimbal Bounty Treasury and Escrow. Some of you might have noticed that on Canvas, there is a 401 level module about this, like the previous version of this. And over the next few weeks, this is another thing that we might get a chance to look at today, and if not very soon, we're going to look at deploying this contract on pre-production, beginning to use it, and then we're also going to start actually using it to provide real rewards to people here for completing bounties. So more on that coming. Any questions about anything I've shared so far? All right, just jump in and interrupt me. I'll finish this overview before we get into some content. As you've heard, we are also working on just designing the PPBL credential tokens. For the most part, this means the metadata that will be provided with those tokens. But if anybody here has innovative ideas that you would like to try to bring to life about the utility of a credential token, I think those can be really interesting conversations. What we know is over the next few weeks, everybody here will complete different mastery assignments and might contribute to different projects. And so the question I'd like everybody to pin for now is, okay, if students who complete the course each complete a different subset of mastery assignments, and they make a different set of contributions to ongoing projects, what might we want to represent in the metadata in the transaction that mints a credential token? And that's a question that we're going to really zoom in on together, but only after we all start making these, completing these mastery assignments and these contributions, okay? But just start thinking about that in the back of your mind, and we'll jump into that. Yeah, hey. Hey, I saw you on mute, but I'm not sure if I can hear you. And then finally, there's the project around reporting, right? Or creating dashboards on the movement or ownership of given tokens. And I just started bringing this topic to the tokenomics group yesterday. And we're going to continue over the course of this month to build that bridge from the Plutus PBL work we're doing here to the tokenomics work that's been ongoing at Gimbal Labs. And one outcome that we might see come out of this work is that people with interest in tokenomics who might want to see one or another representation of some on-chain data could make a request to us here in the PPBL course, and then different people could choose to try to implement some of those ideas. That's just a preview, and just like some of these other things I'm sharing, much more to come on each of those. I just want you to have this high-level view. Hey, just interrupt me when you got sound working. So that's the project overview. And I was hoping to have a little chart ready to show you of the 300 level modules and mastery assignments, but I got pretty deep into the front end work, which was really fun. So I'll make sure to update this after our call today and ping everybody on Discord about this. But just to give you a preview here of what exists already, let me share on Canvas. Oh, nice. We got some new addresses rolling in. That's awesome. So what you're going to see is that every 300 level module is going to have a set of 4 mastery assignments. Level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4. And similar to previous assignments, what we're trying to do is make the actual submission be relatively simple, okay? So for example, to complete this assignment, there's step-by-step instructions of what to do. It's a really good exercise to understand how these smart contracts interactions work. But if you're successful on this, all you have to share for the assignment is the unlocking transaction. So, right, the transaction hash, which you can get on Cardano Scan, once again, because that does use the pre-production network, okay? And you'll see a similar thing on the next assignment, which is to create your own version of the faucet, and once again, to submit transaction hashes from those interactions. There's a couple more 300 level assignments that will be published over the course of the next few days. We might not have all of the details fleshed out at first. So like mastery level 4, gonna update those details ASAP. But you'll start to see the 300 level modules opening up, and you should expect to see a set of 4 mastery assignments on each one. Any questions about that bit? Okay. So the 300 level modules are about specialization. And in the faucet project, you have a chance to just further think about or demonstrate your mastery of building transactions. In module 302, which is forthcoming, you'll look at some different queries to the blockchain, both grabbing data and just passively presenting it on a page, and grabbing data to use as you build dynamic transactions. And then module 303 is a deep dive into Plutus. And the basic mastery assignments there will have to do with some initial interactions with this Gimbal, Bounty, Treasury, and Escrow. And then the mastery level 4 assignment there is going to be an extension on what Mix begins to show us tomorrow regarding the 0 to 1 game. So that's the administration part, just providing updates for everybody about what's going on and what's upcoming. But let me, before, there's a couple of things we could look at today regarding front ends or the Gimbal Bounty and Treasury contracts. But does anybody else have immediate questions, whether it's regarding logistics of the course or something that you are working on right now?
I actually had a kind of like a side question, something that I was kind of toying with on my own. Is this a okay space for that?
Oh, of course.
So I'm working on a faucet to where my end goal, I would like for it to be able to shoot out, let's just say for distribute actually a random NFT based on a lot of NFTs that I have in a smart contract wallet. My initial thought was possibly to like use like the singleton function to pull a UTXO. So I was going to individually bundle the token to like a UTXO. So every time it pulled the UTXO, it'd possibly be a random one. But I was wondering if you had another like a random function that would allow you to select and grab a random asset in a contract.
Ooh. And so in this case, the assets would be pre-minted and stored at the escrow or at the contract address, right?
That's one angle I'm going to. It's funny you mentioned that, because I also do want like a minting aspect, but what I just want to get just like a base prototype, so I can kind of make some tokens and just kind of get the ball rolling. So I think I might have to go into a minting policy as well at that faucet. But right now, I'm just wondering if we could do it from like an already made asset.
Yeah, yeah. You know, okay. So two things. One, just make sure to look at Jaemun E's comment in Discord in the Plutus chat channel. I just noticed it. He asks, is it possible to mint tokens from a script in the same transaction as a smart contract validation is occurring? For instance, with a faucet, could the contract be used to check if the user has an access token and also check that some tokens are being minted, but rather than those being pre-supplied at the contract address? So just know that I think that's a really good question and a very good exploration for any of us to take a look at. Oh, is that Justin? Is that you? Might be. Justin, I see that you're unmuted, but I don't look. It doesn't look like we're getting sound. But that would make sense. Jay Mooney. That would. I understand the name now. So that's definitely possible. It's worth looking at, and at a very high level, one thing to recognize is that you can write a transaction that unlocks from several different contracts all in one transaction, right?
I love that.
Right?
I love that.
Validates from this one, validates from that one. And like Justin is saying in this question, maybe even references a Plutus minting validator. So yes, right? A lot of the really interesting functionality that we can build is not going to rely on just interacting with a single contract address, but might involve interacting with some set of contracts and even a Plutus minting validator. So yeah, I think that's a wonderful thing to explore, and people should be doing that.
Thank you so much, James. Could you think if we put a handle, just, just throwing some stuff out there in one of these smart contracts, do you think that that might allow us to have, kind of a little named attribute there? I don't know, just something to think about. That, okay.
Well, okay, so Don, when you ask that question, it makes me just want to do live coding 24/7, right? What I really want us all doing is like sitting around trying to figure this stuff out together, right? So this is beautiful. And these are the kinds of tasks I give myself just to keep trying to figure out the next thing. And so, yeah, if you have, if people just want to start throwing stuff on that Miro board that I shared, right? If there's not even what I'm going to do on the Miro right now is I'm just going to put a big box that says, put your crazy ideas here. Okay. And so, yeah, like and this is another one of those cases where you might find somebody to collaborate on because you want to be hacking away at the same thing. Now, Dominic, to the other part of your question, right? Could we suppose that we don't pull out all of those bells and whistles about using multiple contracts and a minting validator and all that? Suppose that we just want somebody to randomly pull a token, an already minted token that's just being stored at a contract address, right? Is it worth it just to do that thought exercise?
That'd be great.
Right. So here's just one way to think about it, and you could use this as a starting place and then go from there. Imagine if each of those assets was in a different UTXO with a different datum on it. Here we would be. We would have this set of UTXOs, each with a different datum. And when you query an address from, for example, GraphQL or Koios, and you get a set of UTXOs at that address, you will also see the datum hash connected to each one. Now, where's the randomness going to come from? Randomness in Haskell is already its own challenge. And you can study Haskell just to learn how randomness is treated there. But in a Plutus contract, it's an even greater challenge because Plutus contracts need to be deterministic. And so embedding randomness in a Plutus contract, I'm not aware of a way to do it, but randomness or pseudo randomness in a JavaScript project is easy. Okay. And so imagine if you could query a contract address, get all the UTXOs there, filter by datum hash, or just get an array of all the datum hashes you see there, and then randomly select one of those and grab the UTXO with that datum hash, right? Maybe there is a number, maybe the datum just represents a number, right? So they're serialized that way, 1 through n, and you select a random number, you hash that number, and then you filter for the UTXO that has that datum hash on it, for example, right? So the randomness can come from, without the highest level of security, can be right there in your front end code. Maybe you make a microservice from your own back end that fulfills that randomness. But those are all things I would recommend exploring if that was your goal.
That's so beautiful. I have, we were doing like I put like a website on a token that just displays like different projects that we're working on as you click through it. And I use a function that I, take like all of the pictures or the GIF files, and I put them on a number, and then I put those numbers in an array, and then I mix it up, and whatever you click, it throws another one out. Applying it here, just giving like a handle to the asset in the datum Thank you. It was foggy, but now it's a lot clearer, and I think I have a path to beat down. I mean, so much so like it's going to be hard to stay on this call, but I'm going to. Thank you so much.
Dude. Oh, I know that feeling. Hey, well, and it'd be fun to have you. That sounds like a really cool library or of projects. And so if you ever want to do a playground presentation or do a takeover lecture in one of these coding sessions, it'd be fun to have you there.
Ada Gotchi would love to come, and
Cool.
yeah, anytime, man. That'd be so great. It's one of our bucket lists.
Awesome. Cool. Nice. All right. Yeah, that's fun. It's hard to now pull mind away from that. Very cool. And yeah, I threw a yellow square on the Miro board that just says, put your ideas here. So if there's something that you're like, hey, next time I have 2 hours, I want to see if I can accomplish so-and-so. That's the kind of thing. Drop that there. And if we can, I would like to personally get better at just jumping into like a Discord live room or sharing a Zoom link when I'm hacking away at something. But open invite, obviously, to everybody else. Find your collaborators. Let's take that chance to just go out there and embarrass ourselves by trying to make something work in real time together. All right. Back to some code. Do people have a preference? And just speak up if you do. Would it be more interesting to folks to take a look at the front end faucet unlocking transaction that we just got working about 30 minutes ago? Or would it be more impactful to start looking at the Plutus code for the bounty and escrow project? I'm thrilled to do either. Or again, if anybody has other questions or something else you want to look at, we could do that too. But any strong preferences between looking at Plutus versus looking at the front end today?
Front end for me.
1 vote for front end.
2.
3.
2. All right, let's hang there. Justin's got a vote for the bounty project. Front end.
It stays front end.
Oh, we got a pretty good mix. Let's do a quick look at the front end and then finish with Plutus. Okay. My goal will be just to give a little tour of what's going on right now and to suggest some things that you might want to explore next. So just really quickly with the front end, I just pushed these changes so they're now accessible. And if you run, oops, it's not running right now though. So just a few notes on this. If you pull the latest changes on the main, or I forget if it's main or master, on the main branch of the front end template, you'll be able to see that the nav bar has been updated. There's now this PBL faucet link up top. And when you click on it, you'll see a page that looks like this. The goal in this project is for everybody who wants to add their own faucet instance. And now that we've got this last bit working, we're ready for that. So I'm going to go in and finish off that module and make sure that all those steps make sense to everybody. So that part will be really fun. But what's finally working is that now we have this little component here where the unlocking is going to happen. And here, let me just add a heading there. I'll put this at the top. There, that looks better. Unlock. I can connect to an eternal wallet because, as Lucas showed us on the recent video, eternal is set up to work on pre-production. You can see down here in my bottom right-hand corner, I have an eternal wallet connected to pre-production, and it's also connected to be DApp for DApp interactions. And I've got a newly compiled address. Here's the balance of test gimbals at that address. Here's the amount I specified in my validator parameters. And then this is what I would expect to return to the faucet right here. And then finally, there's a UTXO object in the format that is specified in mesh. And more on this bit in just a moment. But just to show you, crossing my fingers, that it works, when I click unlock those tokens, this is normal for Eternal to take a moment like this. I can see that it's a smart contract interaction. I can see my collateral inputs, and then I can see 3 UTXO inputs down here. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. That's okay. So my inputs, one from the contract address with the gimbals that are locked there. One from my connected wallet that has a PPBL summer 2022 token. And actually, look, it's pulling from 2 different wallets. This is showing us that kind of multi-address functionality of Eternal. And it's happening to pull 2 UTXOs that have more than enough PPBL summer 2022 tokens and plenty of ADA to cover fees. So what are the outputs? Well, I want to pull 250 test gimbals from the faucet and return the remainder of them to that contract address. And this is what that contract address insists on. It's got to get the proper remainder of gimbals, otherwise it won't validate. And then the summer 2022 tokens come back to the sender. This one does, and I guess this is the change. These test ADA amounts are higher than I expected them to be. I want to look at that. So these are, as we'll see in a moment, not specified in the transaction build. So I got to ask Cremo why this is happening. But in any case, let's just sign this thing. And if it works, yep, we should get a transaction hash. So you can see we now have this end-to-end solution on pre-production. I was hoping to be here a few weeks ago, but I was trying to get this out to you just as all the testnet shenanigans went down. And so here we are, now caught up with a working basic end-to-end contract and next steps forthcoming. Just to take a quick look at the code in the front end here. And there's a pattern here that we will use every time we build a transaction, okay? So when I clicked the button to unlock the tokens, down here, there's a button, unlock those tokens. On click, it calls this function, handle unlock tokens. And that's really where the action is happening right here. So when this function is called, we check, is a wallet connected? We check which network we're on. If it's number 1, this will fail and we'll just alert the user, hey, for now, this only works on testnet. Let me change that to pre-production. Okay. then this is the piece that we just discovered together, Abdelkrim and I, is that there are a handful of different parameters on pre-prod from what's hard coded into mesh for the previous network. And so he might make a step to hard code these, but probably not. So for now, in order to interact with the contract on the pre-prod testnet, we have to add these parameters at the time that we are initializing a new transaction. Okay, so often the end goal would be for this bit right here to be a lot simpler. It'll just look like this. Okay, so I would say const tx is a new transaction, initiator is the connected wallet, and then we just add a bunch of stuff to that, right? What assets do we want to send? Where do we want to redeem value from? And this is what it will look like eventually and in the long term. But for now, when we initialize that transaction, there's those couple of extra things we need to add. The unique pre-production parameters. I forget which ones we had to change. The block size was different. The xmem and the block xmem were different. And we realized we were getting an error when those things were not correct. So these are correct now. You should be able to use this as boilerplate. But if you run into a problem, just reach out and we'll figure out if that might be the problem. The other thing is pre-production, of course, is still in the Alonzo era. What do we have? So the mainnet hard fork is on the 22nd. That means the pre-production hard fork should be 5 days before that. So September 17th, 10 days from now, we'll be able to write Vassal right here. And that's the default. So actually we won't have to write it at all at that point. But for now, we want to specify Alonzo era on both mainnet and on pre-prod, just to tell Mesh, hey, these are the cost parameters we're using when we run a Plutus script. So we initialize the transaction, close those parentheses, and then just with this series of dot functions, chain onto that what else we're doing. Okay, so what do we want to do with that transaction? And this is how Mesh works. Well, we want to send some assets to the connected address of the browser wallet that's connected. We'd like to send some assets and an access token. Back to the contract address, we specify, I'll show you these above. We want to send some assets back to the contract, and we want to make sure that some datum is connected to that UTXO. And then finally, where is this coming from? Well, we're going to redeem some value from the contract itself. So we look for the particular UTXO. Because there's only one UTXO there, we get those as an array, but then we just ask for index 0. This would be more complicated if you had a bunch of UTXOs. So I was mentioning to Dominic a few minutes ago, if you do have a lot of UTXOs at a contract address, you can filter them by datum hash to find the one that you want. And then you could use that in a place like this, but there's other ways to deal with that as well. And then we need the unlocking datum and the unlocking redeemer here. Any questions about the basic form of this transaction build?
I have a question, since we kind of spoke to it. When you're choosing the UTXO down, is that something, I'm not saying this, is that something where you could like where you could parse a query response from GraphQL or Kyrios to get Kaios to get what you're looking for?
Yeah, bingo. So actually built into this component, right? So I'm showing you some boilerplate more or less right here, but not the specifics of all these things. These are all defined above. So let's look at a few of those. So the redeemer I need to do this again with the PKH version of the contract, but just for troubleshooting, I went back to the simpler version of it. More to come there. Here's where I'm specifying these different assets that are being sent to each place. So assets to sender is the faucet asset. What's the faucet asset? Well, for now, it's just hard-coded right here. This represents T gimbals on pre-prod. So we define faucet asset, and we say, okay, the unit is that asset ID. How many? We do a little bit of arithmetic to say how much should be going here and there, okay? Access token, this is also at the moment hard-coded. This is a PPBL summer 2022 token on pre-prod, and we're just making sure to send one of them. As long as we try to send one, that means it'll be used as input as well, therefore satisfying the validator that we're using here. But
Now, is that the standard policy with the period and the asset name? I didn't see a period.
It is, yeah. So, okay, the way the Cardano serialization libraries treat the asset ID, right? It's the whole string without the period. So this is policy ID dot token name is how it would appear on Cardano CLI. And so to handle a unit, all you do is you take that whole string and you get rid of the dot, and that's how units are handled in the serialization libraries. But now back to your other question. Yeah, we obviously, if I'm connected to a wallet, I can get the information from my connected wallet. I can see the address of it right here. I might be able to, well, here I can see the pub key hash of that wallet right here, and I can query the balance of that wallet and all that stuff. That's right there because of CIP 30, right? I'm able to just look at these wallet details. But whenever I want to deal with UTXOs from anything other than my connected wallet, whether it's another person's wallet or in this case, a contract address, I'm going to need to query and get this information from somewhere. Now, obviously, this is not what it would look like in a production-ready front end. I was just doing this for a little bit of testing. And so this is an array of UTXO objects as Mesh defines them with TypeScript, okay? And that's the beauty of using Mesh, is that we've got all the type checking because they've kind of gone through and created all of these types and a whole lot more, and you can look through those and kind of start to understand them. And that's another thing we can do in further dives into the front end, is we can look at these data types and how to use TypeScript. But just keeping this kind of at the preview level and giving you some things to think about. We're using GraphQL in this case because Koios is not yet running on pre-production. I would personally rather use Koios because it just abstracts this step away and allows us to create some microservices within our project. But it's no big deal to do it this way. So I say, look, let's write a GraphQL query. We can call it UTXOs at address, but you can call it whatever you want, right? And as a argument, it takes the address that we're querying. In this case, I want to query the contract address. So that's what I'm calling it. We're looking for all the UTXOs where the address of that UTXO is this address. And we're asking for the information we need, the TX hash and its index, the value, which means ADA or Lovelace inside of it, and then the whole set of tokens as well. And then we take that information by running the query right here. The contract address is just saved in a different file, so we can import it and use different contracts. And then once we get those results, we say, okay, let's use that data, right? So this is, what's the word I'm looking for? Not deconstructed. Any JavaScript devs remember what this is called? I'm decomposing or deconstructing the object I'm returned into these different parts that I might get.
Deserializing?
No, not deserializing. Yeah, it's like that. Now there's a word for this in JavaScript when you get the parts of an object like this. It's just not coming to me right now. But in any case,
Yeah,
we get,
I think I know
we
what
get
you
the data,
mean.
the loading, and the error. Yeah, if you think of it. And then we say, okay, well, if we have some data, let's then populate. Where do I do this? Maybe that's done down here.
Is it destructuring?
Destructuring. Yes, that's the word. That data is destructuring. Okay, so then we have a couple of messages right here. So if we're loading, we'll just show the state is loading. If it's an error, we'll show that. But most likely we will successfully get data. And if we do, we're going to try to create an asset list and a contract UTXO from that data. Okay, this tells us how much Lovelace was at the contract address. This shows us how much of a given faucet asset was there. Once again, because I'm doing a very simple case, I can cheat a little bit. I can use index 0 because I know that this is the funny thing about working with the blockchain, right? If I manage my UTXOs correctly, I can count on my ability to be lazy like this and just say, hey, give me the first index in those arrays because I know that they're each going to be of length 1. But that's not going to be effective if we're talking about collections of UTXOs and collections of tokens. This is just giving us a basic starting point so that we can start to think about more complicated logic later. Okay, but then this contract UTXO, we use typing above to say that contract UTXO is an array of UTXOs. What are UTXOs? Those are defined in mesh. That data type is given to us. And so by writing this bit right here, we know that our code editor will complain if whatever we try to feed into contract UTXO doesn't match this type that's already specified in the library. So we initialize that as an empty array. And then down here, we put something in that array. We say, okay, in that contract UTXO array, put an object that matches the type of the UTXO as it's defined. And you can look further into mesh and you can see, okay, it needs an input object with this is the transaction hash and the index. And then it needs an output object that represents the value inside of it, the address it's living at, the amount, which is all of the assets inside. And if there is one, a data hash, which because we know the datum value, we're able to just kind of hard code in right here.
If we had the same datum hash, could that amount of asset list, could that be an array or possibly like a dictionary of key pair that could be used to pick a random one?
Interesting. Yeah, maybe you could filter. So this asset list is also a typed object, or it's a typed array. It's an array of asset objects, which just like UTXO are defined by mesh. And asset objects have to have this type right here, a unit and a quantity. So unit can just be Lovelace and then some number of Lovelace, in other words, your ADA, or it can be that policy ID token name string that I showed you above and whatever quantity of those there are. But yeah, you could filter these. If my data is returning, let's look at that GraphQL query again. if my data is returning that set of tokens, then I should be able to look into that data and filter through that set of assets, which makes sense because look, I'm taking the lazy approach just because I know that because of the way I'm managing these UTXOs, there's only going to be one for me to look at. So just take the first object in that array, and that's the one I'm looking for. Same thing. Which token am I referring to? The only one there, because once again, I'm managing the UTXOs to do it that way. But if I accidentally had a couple extra UTXOs at the contract address, this would no longer work, right? Somebody could break my DApp just by sending an extra UTXO that would just gum up the system, right? And same way, if there were multiple tokens, I wouldn't be able to just say index 0, but instead I could do something much more interesting like Dominic is suggesting, like filter for the ones I'm looking for, right? Tokens dot filter, where the value, I would have tokens, it would be tokens. Yeah, it would be tokens dot filter asset dot policy ID must be equal to whatever the one I'm looking for. So that's a great thing for us to build as an exercise. And when we think about writing, this will be one of the mastery assignments for querying the blockchain, is writing a dynamic transaction builder that's actually referencing something like this. And clearly there's a lot more advanced logic we could start to add here.
James, this is so amazing. It just, my top blew off. The questions I'm asking myself running, I'm just imagining, I'm in paradise right now, man. Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Yeah, man, that's really good to hear. No, and I hope that the main point is getting across, right? Like, to get started, you start somewhere with a simple case, and that's kind of what these index 0 references represent. Hey, we're starting from a simple system, and piece by piece, as we have bigger ideas for the logic and functionality we want to write, obviously we want to move beyond just grabbing the one and only object in an array and into more dynamic ways of looking at that data. But anyway, we build that UTXO here. And that, where is this referenced? This is referenced when we try to redeem value. So this is the mesh function that you would use when you want to unlock from a Plutus script. And you can see when I mouse over this, because of how TypeScript works, I can mouse over each of these things and I can see, okay, what does send asset take as arguments? It takes an address, which is a string. It takes assets, which is an array of asset. And then there's some other options that we can include there. What does redeem value take as arguments? Oh, it takes a string that represents that CBOR encoding of our Plutus script. It takes a value, which is the UTXO I was just showing you how to build. Right? Which one? The only one, the one at index 0. And then it takes some additional options. But because we're trying to redeem from a Plutus script, clearly we're going to want some kind of datamid redeemer here. So if we want to use a front end to unlock any assets from a contract address, this is more or less what it's going to look like, right? You might have a different number of send assets here, depending on what needs to go where and who needs to get what from that transaction, right? And we're only unlocking from one simple contract here. The data might be more complicated. The redeemer might get more complicated. But this is the general format of things. And this is what we're going to continue to build from. So I think I'm moving about as fast as I can just to give you the overview here, but look for in the coming days and weeks, some opportunities to dive a little deeper into this and get it working yourself. Who's got questions about how this is working on the front end?
Just a very, very, very noob question in terms of, could you just walk us through very quickly? I'm a bit concerned because I'm trying to work on this in terms of for the dashboard and everything. Just the keywords of what's the stack here. It's React, but it's not React.
Good.
It's the other templating thing. And then,
Good.
so just a bit in terms of what are the core stack components and the core places to code to actually build the thing.
Okay. First of all, you're right. This is built on React. React is already a library that makes it easier to do a lot of things with JavaScript. Okay, so you start at the bottom level, you've got JavaScript. One level up from that, you've got React. But then another level up from that, we are using Next.js, which you can see right here is a React framework.
Okay.
Other React frameworks include Gatsby and Redwood, and I think there's a whole bunch more, right? So at this level, we're getting a lot of React boilerplate provided to us, in this case by Next.js. So that's number one. Next.js is lighter and less opinionated than Gatsby in a lot of ways, which makes it easier to customize the GraphQL interactions that we're eventually going to want. Gatsby turned out just to be a little too opinionated about how to use about how to use GraphQL, which made it kind of clunky to use, especially in a teaching context like this. What Next is opinionated about is how data is handled. So anybody who's going deeper into the front end, you're eventually going to want to learn more about how data is rendered. So this, you see right here, it says hybrid, static, and server rendering. Basically, anytime any user ever opens up a web page in their browser, some of what they see was built or rendered on someone else's server and then sent across the internet to their web browser. But other data might be queried directly from that user's browser and then injected into the page in real time. And depending on how dynamic your data is, those different options are all going to come in handy. So as you learn Next.js, you'll need to wrap your mind around static site generation and server-side rendering and client-side rendering. The good news is we're providing that. So even right here in the front-end template, there are some example pages. Templates. So you see over here, there's a templates folder and it says CSR, ISR, SSG, SSR. These are kind of boilerplate templates for how to use each kind of rendering that is exposed in Next. Client side, this one says is for incremental, static site generation, and server-side rendering. There's a lot of similarities between all of these, but if you want to become an expert in Next, that's something that you'll definitely want to spend time on, okay? And I'm happy to do a dedicated deep dive into that. So that's Next. And then for the rest of the stack, you can look at the package JSON to see what else we're relying on. And so Apollo Client is probably the most convenient library for interacting with GraphQL. There are other options, but this one makes it, I think, pretty user-friendly and learnable. And then we're also importing GraphQL. So that helps us with the queries. Chakra UI is 100% optional. There's probably a half dozen different options you could use here. Off the top of my head, Tailwind or Material UI. There's a bunch of other ones. And I don't have a strong opinion about this. I just think Chakra is easy enough to use, and yeah, it provides you like words that make sense. Like I need a box, or I need a heading, or I need some text, which I like that for beginner friendliness. Of course, we're using Mesh, right, which is now alongside these other libraries. This is the package that we use to do all of these Cardano interactions. And then these ones, Emotion and Framer, I think these are dependencies of Chakra. I would have to double check that. But the key ones here, if you want to learn Apollo Client, it's worth reading those docs. If you want to learn about Chakra UI, you can read those docs, or you can Google what are some alternatives to that. Oh, Formic makes it easier to deal with forms. You can see the description of it: build forms in React without the tiers. Or building a form, that's an unnecessary thing for us to talk about right now, but it turns out to be surprisingly hard in React, and Formic makes it a little bit easier. Yeah, any questions from anybody about these dependencies?
I'm just noticing that Modify Mesh's version is the humblest one, just 0.0, but it's really powerful. I'm really
Early
happy that
days,
we're using
hey.
that.
If you're in this class, I think you can say you've been here since Mesh version like 0.03 or something like that, you know, so we're already OGs of Mesh.
Cool. Thank you so much, James. This was great.
Cool. And yeah, like today, I think today's session, right, is more of a survey of what's out there. I hope people are having questions, and just know that you can jump in and ask those things. Nelson, what if collaborators want to use different dependencies? Yeah, exactly. I mean, so you wouldn't want to build a project where you had like a big disagreement with your collaborators about what styling libraries to use, right? So just, you got to make the decision at the start of a project and then stick to it, because it's not possible to go back and forth, right? Once you make that decision. So I would say just check that you and anybody you're collaborating with are happy with a given library. I would say this is the one that's most up for debate, right? Styling, it really is a matter of your taste and what workflows you like. There's no alternatives to GraphQL right here. There are alternatives to Formic, but you can do your own research and see if you like anything better. Same thing with Apollo Client. Like, there are other ways to do it, but I would recommend not spending time trying to reinvent this part or this part or this part. But certainly, yeah, styling, no problem. Different page, yes, they can. Right. Yes, different pages can use different libraries, but man, I get a headache just imagining that, right? It kind of overcomplicates things, but if it's absolutely necessary, I guess, I mean, Material UI is really good for making tables. It gives you a little bit more of that kind of thing. So I guess I could imagine importing Material UI and just using that here and there for table representations. But that can easily get hard to manage, but it's also just mentally challenging to go back and forth between different styling systems. Like, I actually prefer Tailwind. Yeah, I mean, Dagwell, if you like Tailwind in a project you're working on, no reason to change it. I actually like Tailwind a lot. but I think it looks too complicated to beginners, if that makes sense. Like it can be really overwhelming for beginners to see an HTML tag with 12 different Tailwind tags, so I just wanted to avoid that part. But yeah, I would absolutely recommend for anybody who's really interested in design, Tailwind is beautiful. Cool. And you know what? Playing with all of this stuff, that's what's ahead of us. Even starting from JavaScript is not the only way to do things. We're good friends with the Cardano Sharp team who's building on .NET components, and those could be used in a front-end project if you wanted to. I think they're even better suited to back-end services, but these are all things, right? And this is why I hope it's clear to everybody. This course is going to wrap at the end of this month. And all of us here at Gimbal Labs are just going to keep going and learning stuff and building examples and all of that. And anybody here who wants to keep learning or building other examples for future learners to use, open invite to keep participating. Mix points out different packages might not work on different node versions. That's right. That's right. I think we've come a long way on that issue, right? That was big in the early days of us building a front-end template, just because we had such a hodgepodge of dependencies in order to get the serialization libraries to work. But what I'm noticing is that this is a much cleaner dependency list than it used to be. And hopefully people aren't running into that node conflict. But yeah, that can happen. There are certain dependencies that might not work with certain versions of Node. All right. So that was a relatively fast-paced look at what's in the front-end template. More on that to come. And please just make sure to keep your questions coming if you get stuck or you're thinking about anything. But let's take a look now, an initial look at the bounty and escrow contracts. And hey, Mix, I told everybody we're on for tomorrow to start looking at the game. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, it would be an introduction, right? I mean,
that's right.
I don't want to. I will go deeper in that module and lecture next week.
Yeah.
But did you ask about the time for next week? Which
Not
time?
yet.
Oh,
Not
okay.
yet. Yeah. So everybody, the idea here is in the Plutus Course 2 repository, you can pull down the latest changes, and you should now see the Project 303 folder. Inside of Project 303, there's two subdirectories, Bounty Escrow and 01 Game. The 01 Game is based on a project from Plutus Pioneers, and taking more of the approach we've been taking in this course of trying to less rely on the PAB and more to build transactions by hand as we start to understand how this works. And there's some fabulous deeper topics embedded in this lesson that Mix has prepared. So if you want to preview, you can look at the README, start to see what's going on here. But tomorrow we'll start with, we'll use the entire live coding time for an initial dive into this project. And then we were thinking next week, for anybody who wants to go much deeper into that, Mix was offering to do a series of deep dive lectures every day next week. And so I know that not everybody's here right now. So let me put up a poll on the Discord channel about that, and then we'll talk times tomorrow. set a time for
Yeah,
that.
I wanted to suggest, actually it was Matthias that mentioned to me a tool called Lettuce Meet.
Nice.
Maybe we could start by what it allows us to do. Apparently, I haven't used it, but I've been meaning to. Is it goes to Mix, and Mix puts in his availability, and then other people put theirs on top, and then we clearly get the overlapping to come to an eligible time.
Brilliant.
If you want to try it, I'm just going to send you the link on the chat because I've been meaning to try it. Actually, I'm just making a note as well for the study group that we've been meaning to put together. Maybe next week at noon or 11 a.m. 11 UTC on Mondays. But I'm still going to publish that on the student chat with Lettuce Meet as well. So maybe this could be a tool for us.
But James, I introduced you that tool. I mean, that bot, Discord bot, Sesh, about the timing a meeting. Can we use that? Because that one not only has about event and timing, but it can create a pool so people can vote on different timing.
Let's let's dive into that right after this call.
Okay.
Yeah, and
No
whatever tool works. I don't feel too strongly about any of those as long as it works. So yeah, but I wanted to just give a little overview of what's going on here. Basically, the mastery assignments for Project 303 are going to apply to initial interactions with the bounty escrow, and then an advanced assignment that Mix is going to share with us regarding this game. So I wanted to do today is, obviously we only have a few minutes as usual, but just give a very basic overview of what's going on here with the bounty escrow. Let's see what we can cover in 10 minutes, and then I'll be happy to stick around if people have specific questions about this. The first thing I see here in my source folder is that there's 4 different files. One is our typical compiler, so I'll open that. Another is the types, which have been separated out from the actual validator files. And then we have 2 different validators, a treasury validator and an escrow validator. And so the first thing I just want everybody to know about this DApp is that it consists of 2 separate contracts. I mentioned earlier in this meeting that, it's possible to write transactions where you're interacting with multiple contracts at once. And the simple fact is most DApps, effective DApps are going to consist of a set of contracts that all serve their role and they work together to deliver the functionality that we're looking for. And so this is an initial example of this. We have one validator that handles the treasury contract and another validator that handles an escrow contract. And you could start to learn about these in module 401 that's already published. I share an intro video, a diagram showing how these 2 contracts work together. And so you can run with that to build up your background knowledge about this project. At a high level, the idea is that a treasury contract holds a bucket of tokens, some Lovelace, whatever other tokens we want to be able to distribute in the treasury. And then what people are able to do is commit to making some kind of contribution. And when they commit to making some kind of contribution, for example, to a bounty, a posted bounty, it would draw some funds from the treasury and it would lock them in the next contract as a UTXO that represents an individual's commitment to a bounty. So the treasury has one big UTXO with a big bucket of funds. The escrow has a set of UTXOs, each of which represents a different commitment to a bounty. in order to interact with the treasury, here are our guards. And there's a little bit of a cheat right here as well. After Mix teaches us about parameterized validators, or excuse me, parameterized redeemers, we might choose to handle this thing a bit differently. But for now, look what it says. It says validate if the transaction is signed by the issuer or all this other stuff. And what this is doing here is it's providing a backdoor for a bounty issuer to manipulate their treasury. So suppose, you know, I've got 100 ADA and 1,000 gimbals, and I'm trying to get some stuff done. And I've got this budget to spend, and I lock my ADA and my gimbals in a treasury. But then I decide, oh gosh, no, nobody's taking on those bounties. Nobody's committing to that stuff. I don't want to store that value there anymore. The issuer needs a way just to take all the funds out of that contract. Okay, and that's basically what this does. Or maybe the issuer wants to add funds to the contract and combine them with the funds that are already there. This too would provide that backdoor. But only the issuer can do that. And that's represented by a specific pub key hash that is part of our TP. What's TP? It's this. What does that line up with in our type signature? Oh, that goes in the parameters. So maybe you're starting to wrap your mind around how parameters work. And this is another example of a parameterized validator. Now, these are defined in types. We don't define them in this file. It's best practice to keep those types elsewhere. This is really nice for reusability. So in the treasury parameters, what do we see? Well, to define a treasury, maybe this looks a bit similar to the faucet. We define the currency symbol of some access token. We define the currency symbol and the token name of some fungible token that's going to be distributed from that bounty alongside Lovelace. And then here's where we have that treasury issuer pub key hash. There's going to be basically an owner of the treasury hard-coded, right, or at compile time written into that instance of the contract. And that means that anybody who runs a treasury has some extra administrative rights as long as they hold the keys that associate with that PKH.
Could you by chance assign a value on the bounty token to say you could have this functionality if you had this many amount of tokens?
Very good. Okay. Very good. So, right, one way to think about it, I can have one access token and that gives me access, but could I write some logic so that if somebody had a certain number of a fungible token, they get certain ability to interact?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's look at this. So input has auth token is simply checking if a given policy ID is an element of all the input values, right? So there's nothing here that is assessing the number of tokens. But down here, we have a way to check. We can use value of, for example, and we can compare the number of tokens to some other amount. And so, yeah, you could write what you just described would rely on having different redeemer cases, first of all. So this is what it looks like if I want my redeemer to represent just an action. I specify my intentions by saying, hey, I want to either cancel or update or finally distribute a bounty. And depending on what I state as my intention, The contract logic is going to be different for each of those cases. Okay. What you could do is, yeah, you could have different redeemers that state different levels of interaction that somebody might have the right to. And then your guards for that would involve different numbers of a given token. Yeah. Yeah, that would totally work.
God, there's so many options. There's so many ways.
Yeah, well, we got, so here we are. I hope that together we are building additional primitives, right? The faucet mini project, this thing right here, right? A managed treasury and an escrow system. Those are primitives. These are the kinds of things that people are going to be using them in any number of different ways over time. And what we have right here is not good enough yet. So we can improve and we can tinker and we can try out a bunch of different functionalities for this. But Dom, that's a great example of something that we could try. Let's make a version of this treasury and escrow system that doesn't rely on somebody just holding some auth token, but relies on them holding different numbers of some fungible token. That's really interesting. And that would be a really nice flavor of this primitive dApp right here. Okay, to Nelson's question, how does updating a contract work after deployment? So you're talking about if I change the rules here in my validator, I'm assuming.
I think he meant update in the bounty contract, update option.
Either one. Oh, okay. Well, so there's this update refers to a transaction. Okay, so this just means, hey, there's a UTXO that represents a person's commitment to something, and maybe this is what you meant, maybe not. But I want to answer both questions. First of all, in order to update a UTXO that represents a contributor's commitment to getting something done, let's think about what we would want to check for. First of all, only the owner of the treasury should be able to update one of those commitments. We don't want just anybody to come along. So first of all, they would need to be that person. They would need to have those keys. Then this is the opinionated part of this dApp right here, but I believe this is how I would want to see it implemented. So this is how I did it, but you could express different opinions here. First of all, we still need to have a bounty UTXO. So we're going to check, hey, does it create a continuing bounty? Does a UTXO return to the bounty escrow? Because otherwise it's not being updated. But then even more importantly, the output UTXO value must be greater than or equal to what the original data specified. So bounty escrow datum, what's in that datum? Bounty escrow datum, okay. This has the pub key hashes of the issuer and the contributor. It has a certain amount of Lovelace and a certain amount of tokens, okay? Bed, Lovelace amount, bed, token amount. Bed is just bounty escrow datum, okay? And so basically the opinion that this contract is expressing, I'm going to go down to output fulfills value, is that the value back to the value in the new commitment UTXO of both bounty tokens and Lovelace must be at least what it was before. In other words, the owner of the treasury cannot change a bounty so it represents less value once someone has committed to working on it. Could you imagine a different way of doing that? Certainly. But personally, what I want to see is, yeah, once you've committed to working on something, if I promised 25 ADA and 100 gimbals in a bounty, I shouldn't be able to go in later and change that to 10 ADA and 10 gimbals. I should be able to update it and make it more. If you come to me and say, hey, you know, this is actually harder than I thought it would be, I think the bounty should be more, I should be able to say, okay, let's double those amounts. That's great. That kind of update is allowed by the contract, but never something that makes it less. To the other question, what if I update the entire contract? If I change anything in this contract right here and recompile it, I'm going to now have a brand new contract address. So all of those changes I just made have no impact on the contract address that is already there, potentially with some UTXOs, right? Holding some assets on chain. Once assets are committed to a contract, there's nothing I can do to change the rules of that contract without emptying out that entire address. So I hope that makes sense. In terms of the security concern, there's no way to change the rules after funds have been committed to such an address. Does that make sense?
So in the contract, if we want to add more functionality, then let's say we have added more functions to the contract, and like we are making escrow 2.0.
Right.
It is deployed in another address, so the other one won't be able, like, it will just stay idle, or?
Well, okay, so this points to a critical piece of Cardano development, okay? It's a big job to update a DApp. It's a big job to release a new version of the contract, because not only do I have to obviously redeploy that new contract, but I have to close out anything existing in the previous one. So a few ways to do that, right? Like, I think my default assumption is that when I upgrade a contract in a DApp, I'm gonna announce it in advance. I'm gonna say that, hey, on this date, you will stop being able to deposit at the old contract address, and moving forward, all new interactions, anytime something is locked here, it'll be locked at this new address. And then there's going to be a window of time where both contracts are actually running at the same time, right? Some people might be finishing up their commitments at the old version of the contract. We're going to let them do that. So even though we're not adding anything new there, we still have to honestly close out what was happening. And then once the last one is closed down, okay, good. Now the transition is complete. We've got nothing else to worry about. There are other ways, you could create a system where you're able to grab all of the UTXOs from the prior contract address and just move them to the new one. But let's think about that for a second. In order for somebody to be able to, say, unlock all of the bounty commitments at an escrow address, there would need to be a backdoor for doing that. And this contract, as it's currently written, doesn't provide a way to do that. It provides a way to cancel, but in order to cancel, some deadline must have passed. So yeah, I can remove UTXOs if a certain time has passed. I'm allowed to update, but like we just saw, I still have to put the UTXO back at the contract where it was. And finally, I could distribute. Yeah, okay, so that's another choice I have, right? I could just drain the whole contract, but where would I have to drain it to? To all the contributors in the first place. So there's no back door in the escrow contract that allows me to just unilaterally update things, take everything out of here and put it somewhere else. And I think that's better for security, because if I provided that backdoor, just in case the future event happens where I'm updating things and I want to be able to do that, the use of that backdoor is not limited to that honest scenario. If the backdoor exists, we always have to worry, hey, is the bounty issuer just going to rug pull everybody and remove all those UTXOs or something, right? So I would prefer not to build in that possibility to a contract. Now, in this case, I did build it in because we're just testing out the treasury right now, and there's no harm in me emptying a treasury back to myself, because the only reason those funds would still be there is because nobody has claimed them yet. Okay, so yeah, if I want to just empty out a treasury and create a new one, that's fine. But again, interacting with somebody else, once somebody else has participated, no way to do it. How do you feel about that, though? Does that, what concerns might you still have?
No, I'm just thinking about people talking about the hard fork coming and scaling their DApps with Plutus version 2. So how do they change their previous apps, previous contracts to the new version? Like, I was thinking about how do they do that when there are, other people involved, customers involved.
Bingo. That's a big job. And people have their work cut out for them to make those transitions. But here's the key thing to notice. A lot of projects months ago, as early as April, maybe even earlier, they saw that the hard fork date was maybe July, as it was scheduled to be back at that time. And they said, hey, you know what? We're not even going to release our DApp until after the hard fork, because it's not worth the trouble of doing all these things that you and I are talking about right here, right? So yes, plenty of dApps have launched pre-fork, and good reasons to do so, but they've got their work cut out for them to make the change. And people, that's at every exchange that's existing right now, right? That's a major topic, is how are we going to navigate that change? But then a bunch of other dApps just haven't even bothered launching yet. Cool. So if people have further questions and want to dive into Plutus for a little while, I'm happy to stick around, but I also know that we're a bit over the scheduled time. So stay on and hang out, unmute, or drop questions in the chat if you got them. Otherwise, that's all for today. And we'll look forward to learning a bit about Plutus with Mix tomorrow. And I know that at least Dominic and I, we have some things we're excited to go off and play around with. So if that's you as well, go for it. Have fun out there.
You guys have a great day. You already know, James. I'm gonna get some exercise in. Then for a second. You guys have a great day.
Sounds like a great day, man. See you soon.